Hello writers, and welcome back to Spooky Writes, your channel all about writing. I'm your host who is secretly a ghost, Kamal Onur. We're going to be talking all about excuses for bad writing. Now these are excuses that I've heard at various levels of education from people at a variety of stages in their own development of writing. So before we head into the storm, make sure to hit that like button and make sure that you're subscribed. And with that said, let's head into the storm.
It's the raven's call, the werewolf's howl, the vampire's bite. You search through the woods for safety, but all you find is... Okay, rights.
So today I'm going to be going over a number of excuses that we give ourselves often to explain away our bad writing or explain away our bad habits as writers, as creatives. And these are all going to be excuses that I have personally heard or witnessed throughout my own writing journey. And so the first one is going to be, it's just my style. Now this is often used as a way to explain away poor grammar or poor usage of grammar. It's my style to use fragment sentences. It's my style to use run-on sentences. It's my style to use grammar incorrectly. This is not going to fly. This is often an excuse to just say, I don't understand grammar and I'm too lazy to actually learn the rules of grammar. Yes, grammar is so important. If you don't know the rules of grammar, you can always learn them. So this is a terrible excuse to give because if you know the rules of grammar, use them correctly, and if you're not going to use them correctly, it has to be for a reason. You can't just willy-nilly throw around fragment sentences and run-on sentences and say, that's just my style. You don't understand. My style is poor grammar. An editor is not going to appreciate this as a style. So understand that this is one of the biggest excuses that I've often heard people give when their grammar isn't up to par. And now the second excuse that I've heard from people to explain away their bad writing is, I need to be inspired to write, or else it's just not good. And I wasn't inspired to write this scene, which is why it was so bad. Now this is a terrible excuse because you need to be writing, whether you're inspired or not, you need to write those scenes that are not inspiring to you. You need to write those scenes that do inspire you. You need to be writing as much and as often as you possibly can. And just saying, I wasn't inspired, which is why this scene was so bad, is a poor excuse to explain away bad writing. Now this next one is one that I've heard a lot over the years, and that's, I want to be a writer, but I just don't like reading. Can I still be a writer? Now here the question is really should versus could. Because yes, you could still be a writer if you don't enjoy reading, but should you be a writer if you don't enjoy reading? Probably not. And because reading is going to teach you so much about it's going to teach you so much about the craft of writing. It's going to help you to develop your voice. It's going to help you in every aspect of your writing. And if you're not willing to read, if you find reading boring and tedious and you're like, I don't like reading, but I want to be a writer, so I'm going to write as much as I can and do zero reading, because newsflash, you're going to have to read your own work. Now number 4 is one that I've addressed in videos previously. And it's the idea that people will say, I don't have the time to write. I'm too busy. And yet, most of the time, people will spend hours and hours watching TV or watching videos or doing something unproductive. And if you have 15 minutes to yourself, you can write a novel. It's going to take a very long time, yes. There are several authors out there whom I have personally heard stories about them writing their novel in 15-minute increments because that's all that they had. or there's several cases of famous authors who wrote their stories during the downtimes between their jobs. So making the excuse that you just don't have time to write is a poor excuse. So stop it. Now this next one is, I write it perfect the first time because I don't want to go back and edit. And so many times people will give this excuse and say, I have to write it perfectly because I'm too lazy to go back and edit my own work. The majority of good writing comes during the editing process, and if you're making this excuse of saying that it has to be perfect the first time, then you're never going to progress. You're never going to be able to fully develop a story to its fullest potential. Editing is part of the writing process, and I would say it's probably the most important writing process. And this ties back into that idea of reading, because you're going to have to read your own work over and over and over again. You should never be submitting rough drafts. You should never be submitting first drafts. You should be submitting final drafts that you have already meticulously read through several times, to the point where you can probably almost quote the piece. This last one has to do a lot with deflection. It's something that people will say if they're not confident in their own writing, and it's typically a way to deflect from potential criticism that you might get, whether you're starting into a writing program or you just entered into a graduate program. You're entering into some sort of workshop where you're going to be sharing your own writing, and this is what people will say, something like, I haven't done much writing, or they might say, this is only the second thing I've ever written, because one of two things can come from that, and that's either, wow, this is really good. Well, it's only the second thing I've ever written. It's so good. Yay, and you get so much praise. Or if it's terrible, well, it's only the second thing I've ever written. So it's a way of putting a barrier and a way of deflecting from potential bad feedback. And part of learning how to become an author, part of learning how to become a writer, is developing your own voice, and it's developing a thick skin, because you're never going to write something that every person is going to enjoy. People are always going to have their own personal opinions of ways that they believe it could be improved, or ways that they believe it should go. They might say, oh, there has to be a love scene in this story. And at the end of the day, you are the creator. You are the one who gets to have the final say. I've had editors who have made suggestions on my work, and sometimes I will accept those changes. Other times I might say, you know what, I think the story that I want to tell has to have this ending, or it has to go in this direction. Most of the time I am willing to meet somewhere in the middle, and it's important to accept feedback on your writing, but you don't want to be so adverse to the idea that people are going to potentially view your work negatively, because people will view your work negatively. Published authors have critics and criticisms of their work. Successful authors like Stephen King, there's so many opinions that can get thrown around, and it's the idea that everyone out there is a critic. So instead of just trying to prepare yourself and put a barrier and say, well, if it's only the second thing I've written, well, it must be really good. Or if it's bad, it's only the second thing I've ever written. So, I haven't been writing that long. So you don't want to be doing this. And these are all excuses to try and explain away your own bad writing. So let me know in the comments down below if you agree with any of these, or if you've ever heard anyone say these excuses, or maybe even you've said them yourself. And as always, keep it spooky. And of course, here's your writing prompt for sticking all the way through the video. I ran up the hill, blank. So set your timer. And start writing. Thank you so much.